topic in Unit 5 is writing the slope-intercept equation given a few different things. So the first thing we're going to start with is given the line. So if we're given a graph, how do we write the slope-intercept form? So the first thing we need to do is identify the y-intercept, which is b, given the graph. Then we determine the slope using rise over run. So neither of these things should be anything new for us. These are both from previous units. And then we substitute the slope and the y-intercept into the equation y equals mx plus b. Remember that slope-intercept form. So looking at this example and using our notes, the first thing it says to do is identify the y-intercept b from the graph. So again, we look for where it crosses the y-axis, which in this case is 2. Then we need to identify another point to figure out the slope. So I'm going to pick this point here. I see it crosses through a corner. Remember, you don't want to just pick any random point on the line. You want to pick one where it crosses a corner or on the grid. So then I figure out slope using rise over run. So I see up 2 and then over 1. So my slope is 2 over 1, or just 2. And then I use that to write my equation, y equals mx plus b. So in this case, m is 2, and b is also 2. So we're plugging it into y equals mx plus b. We figured out slope, we figured out a y-intercept, plug it into that equation, and we are done. Looking at our next example, where does it cross the y-axis? We always look for where it crosses b. So -2. Then I find another point on my graph, so I see here's a corner. So in order to get there, I go up 1 over 3, but it's to the left, so it's not just 3, it's -3, which means my slope is 1 over -3, or -1/3. And then I plug it into the equation y equals mx plus b. Y equals -1/3 x minus 2 in this case. If you have questions about 1 or 2, make sure you pause your video before moving on and ask questions. Looking at the next example, what type of line do I have here? It's vertical, so you need to think of that acronym VUX. When I have a vertical line, my slope is what? Undefined. And does it ever cross the y-axis? No. So there is no y-intercept. Well, how are we going to write an equation of a line that has an undefined slope and it ever crosses the y-axis? Remember, when we're given a vertical line, it's an x equals, and in this case, where does it cross the x-axis? At 2. So x equals 2 is the equation of that line. For our last example, scroll up a little here. What type of line do I have? Horizontal. So what acronym do I need to think of? HOI. The slope of a horizontal line, remember that O tells me that it's a 0 slope. And where does it cross the y-axis? At 4. So the equation of my line is just going to be y equals whatever b is. So in this case, y equals 4. There are no x's for a horizontal line. On the next page are the you-dos for just that section, but before you do them, we're going to finish the notes. Excuse me. So I want you to go ahead and go to the next page where it says writing an equation in slope-intercept form, but this time we're given a slope and a point. So the first thing we're going to do is substitute the slope into the slope-intercept equation, which is y equals mx plus b. Then we're going to substitute the point that they give us. Remember, it's always x, y ordered pair into the slope-intercept equation. Solve for the y-intercept. Substitute the slope and the y-intercept into the slope-intercept equation. So I know that's a lot. There are quite a few steps there. We're going to break it down going over this example. So the first thing it says is substitute the m into the equation y equals mx plus b. So I'm just going to write that equation down here. we know what m is. It tells us that the slope is 2. So I'm going to plug that 2 in for m. Now we're also given this point, and this point has important information for us. It gives us a y and an x value. So in this case, my x value is -3, and my y value, color, is 0. Now I don't know b. Remember, that's what we're solving for. So we're given a slope and a point. We're plugging both of those parts into y equals mx plus b in order to solve for b. So now I look at this equation and say 2 times -3 is -6. I need to get b by itself, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides, which leaves me with b equals 6. Now I have an m, remember up here, it already told us our slope, and I have a b. I have the two things I need in order to write my slope-intercept equation. Y equals m, which is 2, x, plus b, which is 6 in this equation. So let's go over another example. We're given a point and we're given a slope. So we plug it into the equation, y equals mx plus b. My m in this case is -3/4. Looking at my ordered pair, my x value is what? 8. My y value is 2. And I'm solving for b. So -3/4 times 8 gives me -6. And again, it's still equal to 2. I just need to get b by itself. So I add 6 to both sides, which gives me b equals 8. Now I have a slope and I have a b. So I have both things I need in order to write the equation of this line. Y equals m, which is -3/4, x, and in this case b is 8, so plus 8. And that's the equation of my line. All you're doing is plugging the given information into y equals mx plus b, solve for b, and then write the equation of that line. If you have questions about examples 1 or 2, please pause your video before moving on. Again, before you do the you-dos, I want you to continue on to your notes, and then you can come back and do the you-dos at the end. So our last section is writing an equation in slope-intercept form, and this time we're given 2 points. So in order to solve problems like these, the first thing we need to do is use the slope formula, which is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 to determine the slope. Then you choose one point to substitute into the slope-intercept equation. So after you figure out the slope, now all you're doing is like what we did on the previous page. You're going to substitute the slope and the point into the equation, solve for b, and then use your slope and y-intercept to write the equation of the line. So again, the first thing that I need to do is solve for m. And we're going to use that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Oops. So I have -10 minus 6 over 7 minus x1 is -1. So minus a negative becomes a positive. -10 minus 6 is -16 over 8. You need to simplify that. -16 divided by 8 gives me a -2. So now I have my slope, and I have a point. I'm going to use this first point. It doesn't matter which point you use. You can use either one. You're going to end up with the same b. I'm just going to use the first point. So I'm going to plug into y equals mx plus b. This is exactly what we did on the page before. So my m is -2. Okay. My x is -1. My y is 6. And I'm solving for b. So -2 times -1 is 2. I need to get b by itself, so I subtract 2 from both sides. So b equals 4 in this case. Now again, I have an m, which I just solved for, and I have a b, which we also just solved for. So now I can write the equation of my line. Y equals negative 2x plus b, which we just said was 4. The last example for our notes is example 2. So again, the first thing I need to do is solve for m. So I'm just plugging that into y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. 7 minus 2 over 1 minus 0. 7 minus 2 is 5. 1 minus 0 is 1. I need to simplify that. M is just 1. Sorry, m is just 5. Then I plug into y equals mx plus b. Again, I'm going to use this first point here. My y value is 2, m is 5, x value is 0. Anything times 0 is 0, so b equals 2. Now, how could I have just looked at that point and known that 2 was the y-intercept? I didn't even need to do all of this work. I could have just used my super smart algebra brain and said, I know that this point right here has to be the y-intercept because the x value is 0. So because of the fact that x is 0, I know that 2, in this case, has to be my y-intercept. So now I have an m and I have a b. Again, m and b. And I can use those to write the equation of my line. Y equals m, which is 5, x plus b, which is 2. If you have questions before moving on, make sure you pause your video. Otherwise, you can go back and there are 3 sections of you-dos. So you should be solving by writing slope-intercept equation given a graph. You should be writing slope-intercept form given 2 points. And then on this last page, writing slope-intercept form given a slope and a point. So you can go ahead and get started on those.